two devastating world wars, the Cold War, and the dramatic changes brought about by the atomic age. His generation also saw progress triumph over the tumult. They saw an ascendant America that could shape the world for the better: economic stability, opportunity, the spread of democracy, and a more just and modern society that embraced the values of equality and civil rights. In so many ways, President Kennedy came to epitomize the promise of a new, more youthful America, and he embodied the spirit of a new generation. As president, he gave voice both to the promise and the responsibilities of that new generation. He inspired the nation with ambitious goals and asked that every citizen be an active participant. His powerful belief in looking at America anew and serving more fully in the life of our nation touched every part of our society and profoundly affected millions of American families. And you can count my family among them. I grew up in the heart of the anthracite coal region in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and families in our region took President Kennedy's message to heart. Service, whether it is to your family, your community, or your country, is both an obligation and a privilege. The picture my parents had of President Kennedy hanging on the wall was a reminder of that message. And that same picture, by the way, after 57 years, still hangs in the living room of the house where I was raised. In 1960, Senator John Kennedy visited my hometown in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and he gave an inspiring campaign speech to an overflow crowd of more than 12,000 in Garfield Square. My parents were there. And in January 1961, my dad, Jeremiah, boarded a train at 2:45 a.m. in a snowstorm, along with 600 other impassioned Schuylkill Countyans, and traveled to Washington, D.C. to attend President Kennedy's inauguration. My mom, Kate, who also loved President Kennedy, was at home with 3 children under the age of 5, watching on television. And Dad, she never let you forget that. And at the ripe young age of 89, I'm proud to say my dad is still inspired by President Kennedy, enough so that he insisted on traveling from Pottsville to Boston to be here today. President Kennedy's ideal of public service was expansive. He believed strongly that the opportunity to serve and participate in our society should be readily available to every American, and his commitment to equality and civil rights advanced a movement in this country. In 1961, President Kennedy appointed Thurgood Marshall to be a judge on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which paved the way for him to become the first African American to serve on the United States Supreme Court. For so many of us, and in so many ways, we are all part of President Kennedy's proud legacy. And I'm pleased that Thurgood Marshall Jr., his wife Teddy, and son Will are here with us today. And I'm proud to represent the 640,000 dedicated men and women of the United States Postal Service, some who are with us today. We live and work and serve in the public in every community in America. And I can tell you that the spirit of public service remains as vital as when President Kennedy elevated the ideal in his moving inaugural address. He dignified and gave voice to the pride in serving the nation that every postal employee feels. It is for this reason that the Postal Service is especially proud to honor President Kennedy today. In just a moment, we will unveil a new forever stamp commemorating President Kennedy. The image is an iconic photograph captured by Ted Spiegel while on the campaign trail in 1959. And to many, Mr. Spiegel's photograph captures Kennedy's vision, determination, and commitment toward building a better future for our nation. You will also notice the words forever and USA. These words reflect the enduring influence of President Kennedy in the life of our nation. And now it is my privilege to invite Ted Spiegel, Matt Kennedy, Thurgood Marshall Jr., and our special guests to join me in dedicating the John F. Kennedy Forever Stamp.
I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Stephen Rothstein, Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, the nonprofit organization that provides essential financial support, staffing, and other resources to the library. The foundation's support makes it possible for the library to perform many of its outreach activities, including its forum program, that together help us communicate President Kennedy's ideals, that public service is an honorable and patriotic profession. Everyone, please welcome Stephen Rothstein.
Thank you, Jamie. Let's hear it again, Jamie, and for all the staff of the library. They do such a great job. I also want to recognize all of the team from the foundation and from the Postal Service who've worked so hard. Join me to thank them for their great work. In addition to the distinguished folks that Jamie mentioned, I also do want to recognize Ron Sargent and Mary Reed from our board and thank them, and Denise Richards for being here, and thanks so much of all of you. Thank you so much. Great. This is a very important day. If you look back at history, on February 20th in 1962, John Kennedy welcomed John Glenn back from his around-the-world orbit and thanked him. So when you think about the legacy of John Kennedy, it lives in the International Space Station. It lives in countries in the Peace Corps volunteers. It lives in our city and around the country. And so we're very appreciative of the Postal Service, Postmaster General, and for all that they've done to make today special. I also want to recognize AT&T for their support. And we have folks from literally around the country, and I know we have a family from Texas. For your family, we appreciate your being here and all of your support and leadership. But it's really a pleasure to introduce Congressman Joseph Kennedy III. Congressman Kennedy is from the 4th Congressional District in Massachusetts. He is the son of former Congressman Kennedy, Joe Kennedy, Congressman Kennedy, and also the grandson of Robert and Ethel Kennedy. In his 3rd term, he's already made an important mark in Congress on a range of issues, from manufacturing to energy to STEM, and finding bipartisan ways to make things happen. Join me to welcome Congressman Joe Kennedy.
Steve, thank you for your kind introduction, for your extraordinary leadership here, leading the JFK Foundation, and the vision that you bring to it, and a long, long connection with my family, and extraordinary dedication to service yourself. To Acting Director Roth, thank you for the service that you have brought to this institution for 15 years. We are deeply grateful for your commitment. Madam Postmaster General, and your dad, welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making the trip. It is a privilege to have you both here in Massachusetts today. Thank you for your decades of service to the Postal Service, your trailblazing tenure as its chief executive. And sir, I may dare say it seems like you've done a heck of a job raising a daughter, so thank you very, very much. To Senator Markey, a dear friend, a mentor, thank you for all that you have done for the state, for our country. I have the extraordinary good fortune of serving in Senator Markey's seat in Washington, D.C. on the Energy and Commerce Committee. It is with somewhat bittersweet, perhaps satisfaction, that I always hear my colleagues say, gosh, we miss Ed Markey. And I say, yeah, me too. Ed, thank you for the example that you always set for all of us. To the Marshall family, to my own extended family, to my brother, to our dear family and friends, to our colleagues in government that are here, and to the 5 other people that happen to be here that don't fit any of those words, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on a special moment. In the centennial year of his birth, there will be no lack of words said about my great uncle. Remembrance is given, tributes dedicated, analyses written, reflections shared, questions asked, contrasts drawn, particularly at this moment. What would President Kennedy think of our country today, right now? What words of wisdom might he share with a divided nation, an anxious and fearful and weary of so much discontent? I wish I knew. But I do come back to one idea, a steadfast value, one unshakable belief that permeates and penetrates nearly every inch of the president's legacy. Faith. Faith in his God, faith in our nation, faith in our people. The man who believed that from civil rights to mental health care to putting a man on the moon, that there was nothing our American system was not capable of, that our people were not capable of. For my great uncle, government wasn't some faceless, shapeless machine. It was human. And that made it vulnerable, imperfect, deeply flawed, and endlessly and exceptionally resilient. The stamp reflects that optimism. Ted, you got a really, really good shot. That confidence, shoulders strong, his face lifted, his eyes tilted up, not hunkered down, not pulling back, not afraid, not deterred, not scared, not defeated. Ever hopeful, ever faithful, that a country that was built on a truth that is as old as the scriptures and as clear as our Constitution could shatter any horizon, shoulder any heartache, and survive any fall. In the days and weeks and months ahead, may each of us hold tightly to that truth. And thank you on behalf of myself and my family for the extraordinary honor that you bestow on President Kennedy today. We are deeply grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for your words and for your service each and every day. We really appreciate it. It is now a special pleasure to introduce our final speaker, United States Senator Edward Markey. For the last, go ahead. For the last 4 decades, first as a state legislator, then as a congressman, and now is United States Senator, Ed Markey has led. And in a time that Washington often cannot find a center, he has found brilliant ways to find a center on critical issues, from Wall Street reform to consumer protection to climate change, telecommunications, work with people with disabilities, and environmental policy. Our state and our country is better off because of the work that Ed Markey is doing. Join me to welcome Senator Ed Markey.
Thank you, Steve, so much, and we thank you for all of your fantastic work here, and we thank each and every one of you for being here today to celebrate the unveiling of a special forever stamp in honor of President Kennedy. What greater gift could we give to President Kennedy on his 100th birthday than by committing ourselves to putting a permanent stamp on our nation's history in 2017 and beyond. A stamp on history that reflects the principles and the ideals of this great president. And my appreciation to the JFK Library Acting Director James Roth for your service, sir, and to Megan Brennan, the Postmaster General of the United States. When I was growing up in Malden, we were taught that President Roosevelt named James Farley as the Postmaster General. Then President Kennedy named Larry O'Brien as the Postmaster General. So it is altogether fitting and proper that we once again have an Irish woman as the Postmaster General of the United States. It is returning, as it should, to its proper place. Maybe a federal holiday, but the Postal Service never stops. So we're so glad that you are here. And to you, Steve, thank you for being the new executive director here at the JFK Library. You've done fantastic work throughout your career, and it's only continuing here today. And to Joe Kennedy, Joe actually represents the gold standard of public service for today and into the future. He is the embodiment of everything great in the Kennedy family tradition of public service. He has the passion and the limitless energy and extraordinary compassion of his grandfather, Robert Kennedy. He has the warrior-like persistence and commitment to progressive ideals like his great Uncle Ted Kennedy, and he has the authentic and genuine love of all people, like his father, Joe Kennedy. And I am so honored to be here with you, Joe, and with your brother, Matt. You represent this incredible family tradition that we are all honoring here today, and we thank you for everything that you do. Senator Warren and I are honored to be the two senators from this great Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I see Linda DeCina Forey sitting down here, and I know so many other state representatives and state senators are here. We all follow in this inspirational tradition of the Kennedy family, inspired to public service because of President Kennedy and his brothers. As a boy growing up, the son of a milkman, working class in Malden, your view of the future was constrained by the neighborhood in which you lived. Conventional wisdom during the 1960 presidential election was that an Irish Catholic from Boston could not win the presidency of the United States because of the bias against people who were of that ethnic and religious background. But President Kennedy's victory shattered those views, not just for Irish Catholic boys like me, but he tore down the barrier and helped to lift the gaze of every religion, every racial makeup, to the constellation of possibilities for themselves, for their families, for our nation, and for our world. And he just changed the perception that so many people had. And it allowed you to dream of being a state representative, a dream of being a congressman, and then the unthinkable dream, which you couldn't even utter, that maybe someday you too could be a United States senator. No, you would never dream that that could be possible. But in a country that is inspired by John F. Kennedy, all things became possible for so many people. President Kennedy's victory and his vision of social justice was a message to all minority groups in America that they too could make important contributions in civic life and participate in the noble calling of public service. Today we see and hear its echo in the Black Lives Matters movement with their call for equal justice and participation. And we saw it on Boston Common when more than 150,000 people gathered for the Women's March. We saw it in Copley Square just a few weeks ago when 20,000 people on 2 days' notice stood up and chanted, "No hate, no fear, immigrants are welcome here." I returned yesterday from a trip to El Paso to visit the border between our country and Mexico. I saw firsthand the desperation of mothers and fathers and children trying to enter America for a better life. President Kennedy believed that immigration policy should be generous and fair and flexible. In his book, A Nation of Immigrants, he wrote that, quote, "The interaction of disparate cultures and vehemence of the ideals that led the immigrants here, the opportunity offered by a new life, all give America a flavor and a character that make it unmistakable and remarkable." In 1961, President Kennedy created the Alliance for Progress between the United States and Latin America as an example of how we should reach out. Joe Kennedy joined the Peace Corps as a further continuation of that tradition. At this time of great anxiety for so many people, we must hear and heed President Kennedy's message with open hearts and minds. From the civil rights movement to the space race to the limited nuclear test ban to immigration policy and the signing of the Equal Pay Act, President Kennedy's legacy continues to live on in importance and urgency. His challenge to land a man on the moon, he asked us to be bold, led to the discovery of new technologies and the exploration of new frontiers that spurred historic funding for scientific research, and Massachusetts has been the direct beneficiary of that race to innovation. And yesterday, we had thousands of scientists rallying in Boston saying that science must not be demonized. That too is a legacy of President John F. Kennedy. The dream of a more peaceful world led President Kennedy to establish the Peace Corps that has sent more than 225,000 Americans to spread goodwill and build bridges of understanding in more than 140 nations throughout the world. President Kennedy championed the arts. He believed there was a connection between achievement in public life and progress in the arts. And he said, "I am certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over our cities, we too will be remembered not for victories or defeats in battle or in politics, but for our contribution to the human spirit." President Kennedy will always represent a bold vision for our nation's future, an idealism without illusion, a commitment to public service and human rights, to science and to the arts, and an irrepressible vigor that signals to the rest of the world that Americans believe that the best days of our country are always ahead of us. 100 years after his birth, I am honored and humbled to be a senator from Massachusetts, the state that produced President Kennedy, whose life is stamped in all of our hearts. Every day I serve in Congress, I work for the timeless ideals that President Kennedy expressed and carry the words from his inaugural address with me to go forth to lead the land we love, knowing that here on earth God's work must truly be our own. In this new century, we must follow the path he laid out for us as we continue to strive towards making our country a more perfect union. Let us commit to fighting for the democratization of access to opportunity for everyone in the United States. Access to quality health care, access to a first-class education, access to a good paying job regardless of your race, your religion, your gender, your sexual orientation, or country of origin. Let us conduct this fight with the grace and the dignity and humility that is the hallmark of President Kennedy's life. He would want us to fight for a civil discourse in this country that matched the greatness of our nation's past and its unlimited potential for the future. So as we explore new frontiers and work together for a better future for all, let us express our gratitude for President Kennedy's life and heed his calling that we, quote, must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Thank you all so much for being here on this great day.